Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. And I just wanted to welcome everyone. And if you're just joining us, please go ahead and put your organization name and location in the chat so we can know who's joining us today. I'm going to drop some more information in the chat that was at the beginning of our chat in just a little bit, so some new folks can have that information too. And we'll be starting at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks so much, everyone. All right, so it is 10 a.m. Pacific time, so we are going to go ahead and get started. If you are just joining us, please go ahead and stick your organization name and location in the chat so we can know where you're visiting us from. And my name is Amber Evie. I'm a grant specialist from Maddie's Fund. I'm super excited to be hosting the first huddle for our No Place Like Home Challenge. Starting in March, participating organizations will be asked to share or expand return to home programs at their organization. There's going to be over $150,000 in grants awarded to participants who complete the challenge. We can't wait to see what you do and the results. Today's presentation will include 20 minutes of presentation time, followed by time for your live Q&A. But before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Coming in, everyone is muted so we can hear the speakers. Once the presentation has concluded, we'll open the Q&A session. There are two ways you can ask questions. So you don't need to have video or a microphone in order to ask questions. You can do this either by raising your hand or typing your question in the chat area. We'll call on you and read your question after the presentation portion is done. So please take a look at the bottom of your screen where it says participants. If you click that button, your participants window will pop open on the right. To raise your hand, click on the hand icon. This is the preferred method for Q&A as it allows us to have you clarify your question so we can hear from you. But however, if you don't have this feature, that is totally fine. The other way you can do it is type it in the chat and I'll read those questions out loud during the Q&A session. And finally, we will be recording this session. The session recording will be posted within 24 hours to our No Place Like Home Challenge group on the Maddie's Pet Forum, as well as on the webpage. So if you want to watch it again or share it with your friend, you'll have access to it in about a day. And I'm super excited for this next part. Our moderator for all 8 huddles is Return to Home expert Gina Knepp of Michelson Found Animals Foundation. Michelson Found Animals Foundation is also a funding partner for this challenge. I'm super excited to introduce Gina. She is their National Shelter Engagement Director, and she eats, sleeps, breathes, whatever else her hobbies are, watches on TV. She is the Return to Home guru. Gina is going to introduce our presenters and moderate the Q&A. Today, we are focusing on creating a culture of return to home. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gina and let her take it away. Thanks so much, Gina.
Morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm so jazzed because when I started teaching about RTO, people looked at me like I had 3 heads. And I knew that it would require a culture change or a shift in our industry to get where we really need to be, where RTH, is what I like to call it, return to home, has a significant impact on life saving. So before we get started, and I know, Amber, you probably are like, what the heck is she doing? I want to drop an article in the chat for everybody to look at later. It's about 3 years old from Harvard Business Review, but I think it really speaks to changing culture and how that happens, which is what we'll be discussing today. And our first guest speaker, where'd you go? Ed Jamison, am I correct, or is Josh going first? It's Ed, right? I can't hear you, Ed.
Hey, Josh is gonna go first.
I am so sorry, I got you mixed up. Dr. Josh Fisher, take the stage and share with us your thoughts on culture change as it relates to RTO.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Fisher. I am proud to be the Director of Animal Services for the City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. Return to home is something that I think a lot of conversation has been had around, and I am super excited to be here to talk to you guys a little bit about engaging your organization and creating a culture of return to home. Gina put it really well, and I think at this point becoming known for stealing some of Gina's lines that are just becoming far and wide known. But she said in an email that I happened to be on earlier today that by the time we're done with all of this, return to home is going to be a household term. And I couldn't agree more, and that we need to get there. And so step 1 of that is getting our organizations on board, right? Because if we can't figure out how to get the folks that are actually doing the work on board, how can we expect to get our communities on board? So I'm going to share my screen real quick. And this is by no means anything fancy. This is just a PowerPoint that I threw together as far as a little bit of information. So this is a little bit about Charlotte, who we serve. We've got 7 small towns plus the unincorporated. I'm not sure what's happening. So then from here, and I'm just going to click this way because it's easier. Here's a group of folks, right, that are associated with our organization. This is staff, volunteers, everybody else. But that's a group of people that wants to save more lives. And the fastest way to save a life is to keep it where it is, right? I think we've all come to the conclusion that shelters are not where we want animals coming. We want them to stay home. So what does that look like? Making it worth it. I know we've talked a lot about how we can incentivize, and nonprofit organizations, government organizations, we've all got to figure out what we can do to get our teams excited about returning to home. So we created these whiteboards in our organization, and they've got the month, they've got 2 slots for last year, this year, each month, how many animals were returned to home. I will be perfectly honest, this was one that was sitting in the closet as a backup, and I just scribbled a bunch of numbers on it real quick. So these are not actual numbers. I just felt like a blank whiteboard was no fun. And then realizing what our limitations are. So for example, our team, we're a government entity. So giving financial incentives is a challenge. Even giving gift cards is a challenge. We actually can't purchase gift cards with, municipal funds. That's a whole thing. So one of the things that we do is we keep track of our staff who have the most animals returned to home, in particular our field officers. And every month, at the end of the month, the officer that returned the most animals home gets a free 8 hours of vacation leave. So they get a day off, basically. And that's how we incentivize it. We keep it, don't tell my human resources folks, we keep it off the books. This is, hey, just don't come in today and we'll clock you in. It's fine. So just don't tell anybody, okay? It's cool. But it's getting creative, right? It's thinking outside the box of how we can get through these. And then some exciting stories. This is in the bottom right, you can see two officers. That's Officer David Woody and Officer Jeremy Fausto. And they were actually employees of the month for returning this Doberman to home. It did end up coming into the shelter for a very brief stint. The young lady that's up in the top left-hand corner is actually a vet tech extern that we had at our shelter. And I personally taught her how to do a leg bandage, which I have not done in 10 years. And the last time I did one was on a horse. So I think this dog's leg bandage turned out pretty well. But these two officers actually ended up getting Employee of the Month because they went and canvassed a neighborhood, knocking on over 100 doors to find who the owner of this Doberman was and get it home. And that's just an example of kind of that cultural shift that we're talking about, and making sure that this is something that it's just truly ingrained in your organization and getting folks on board. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that you can do to create that culture, especially early on, is convincing folks that it's going to be less work for them. Who doesn't want a little bit less work, right? And sometimes that means creating additional work if they do the opposite of what you want. For the very beginning of this, and we don't have to do it anymore, but for the very beginning of this, we actually had additional reports that had to be filed if an animal was brought in without documentation on the efforts made to return it home. So that really incentivized officers to find the home of those pets and make sure that they stayed out there. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Ed, because I know he's got some stuff to add about Dallas.
All right, I'm having a problem finding the unmute button today, which anyone who knows me, that's never been a problem of Ed Jamison. It's great to see everybody on here. It's typically hard to follow Josh, but when I have to follow somebody, it's certainly always great to follow that. And then you put Gina into the mix also. They both talked on the very same framework as me. And before I had ever even known who Gina Knepp is, we kind of connected a couple of years ago. But when I used to be in Cleveland, Ohio, I'm now the director for Dallas Animal Services, a little bit over 3 years. And I was a small director of a small agency called Garfield Heights, Ohio. But I was always like, we're putting so much effort into adoption. Why are we not putting more effort into finding the owners? And we really pushed that at Cleveland. And we had some barriers, and might be something that some of you all do. And then we had even less barriers in Dallas, and have really kicked it into full throttle. To last year before COVID, we did over 11,000 return to owner of dog and cats in the city of Dallas. So when you have a nearly 40,000 intake, you need to do everything in your power to see what you can do to get things back. But as far as the barriers and having to change the culture, in Cleveland, there were some just the old school in general. Hey, we're just supposed to catch these dogs and whatnot. That's either you're going to do whatever you got to do to change that perception across the board. But there was very valid in Ohio, dogs have to have a license. That's like the golden thing in Ohio, is that you have to have a license. So I had gotten devices for my officers, iPads, which some of them you would have thought I just gave them a rocket ship that they had to navigate. But we started allowing the resident to start purchasing the license. So first is find what the obstacle is of what they're saying, why they can't do it. Then it's easy. You can then fix it. They may not be focused on the shelter. They might have worked for the agency for 28 years, a great person, but they're just not going to think any different than what they had. So again, license was the big thing to change, and we fixed that easily. Here, have the person buy the license right here online. In Dallas, it was a little bit different. They didn't not like return to owner, whether in field or in shelter. It was, there's so many animals in Texas. If you know anything at all about Texas, they're everywhere. It was that they didn't want to let animals go home from the field not being altered. Okay, fair enough, no matter what your thoughts are. That's now you've identified what the problem is. Well, a group of funders got together in this huge effort in the city of Dallas, and it basically, they will, if you know anything about Dallas, Interstate 30 cuts it in half, and the underserved is south of 30, north of 30. They're literally two different worlds. And so for an equity component, any citations for your animal not being fixed can be dismissed. So we wrote that in the law. And then nonprofit organizations that care about equity, but also cared about getting the animal population down, you can get that service done 100% free. So the citation itself is what ultimately gets you the services. So we were able to get over that hoop or over that hump. But again, it was a big component of making them understand when you're dealing with the numbers of, near 40,000, every extra one that comes into the building. And we just answered, hey, compliance is a big deal in Dallas. Say department was in trouble for not getting compliance. Okay, we've got an answer to get over that. Your staff, anytime you are changing culture, change management, if people understand the why as to why you're doing something, and that's WHY, not the letter Y, it's amazing. It's like the gates of heaven open up and they go, oh, now I understand. Another interesting component, there was always a return to officer in the building, but there weren't much resources given to them, and it certainly wasn't coordinated. Again, even when an officer out in the field, I found a microchip, no answer, no whatever, they're now communicating back to the shelter. Field officers communicate to the shelter. So they already have a leg up and are able to start working that. Why wait for it to get to the building to start the work when you've got the possibility of getting it? And we will even send a supervisor out. Hey, somebody finally called us back on that chip. This officer is getting their butts kicked. They got a million calls. A supervisor will come pick up the dog and go and return it to them. An interesting tidbit, and we had a student, he was actually overseas in the UK, run all of our return to owner data in 2019. And Gina has seen this stuff. It's crazy interesting. Even when you exclude it, in Dallas, your dog can't be loose, period. It's not allowed to be loose. A lot of times, animal control officer, you chase a dog back home, runs up, you secure it, now do all your stuff. Even when you excluded that the address was the address, the dog was loose on its own property, and that's where it ultimately got returned to, it was still the vast majority of the animals were only a couple hundred feet from their house. So you don't have to be a big city like Dallas to be able to do the math on that. Who wants to zigzag back and forth across their city when that animal is in the neighborhood? We also do things like officers are required to hang two lost and found flyers on the two nearest telephone poles whenever they pick up an animal. Most of the time, kids in the neighborhood or somebody's out mowing their lawn goes, hey, what are you doing? It's like, hey, I just picked up this brown shepherd. They see you hanging that, and it'll start a discussion. We'll say, we think that dog lives around the corner. We see him. So it takes effort, but it is significantly less effort than when that animal comes in the shelter. And again, even when it gets to the shelter, it's significantly less effort to get that animal back to his owner. They already have a bond with that animal. They're not now going to have to readopt a new animal. And it's the best bang for the buck. So I can't speak highly enough about it. I love that this is like Gina's full-time job is focusing on return to owner, because I don't think it was talked about nationally. I think that there were a bunch of people doing it to the best of their ability, but haven't realized there's a lot more you can do that doesn't take a whole lot, and you'll get a much better return.
Thank you, Ed. And you're going to have to forgive me, Amber, if you if there are questions and I can't see them.
That
Here's
is
one.
totally fine, Gina. We can work together to get these questions answered.
I think I just saw one. So I think this is for Ed. How do your officers print posters from their trucks?
Great question. It took a long time. If you work for a government, there's a lot of bureaucracy. Whenever you buy something, then you put an IT component into it. So we are just about there at actually having in-truck printers, but we haven't had in-truck printers. So it is a generic sign that says I was found, or I was found in this neighborhood. The printers, we have a template, and it'll actually put a picture of the dog straight from Chameleon, a found flyer. But we haven't had that for the last 2 years. And so it is a one that you write in the information. But that in itself, again, it starts a lot of discussions, and it's just been a great return when people are able to see, they're out walking the neighborhood looking for their lost dog, and they're able to see that flyer.
Yeah. So Just
Ed,
use
on
signs
that
that they put
note,
up.
sorry to interrupt, Gina. On that note, Ed, there was a question earlier. Are you able to share those photos or a photo of your signs or a template of your signs, or are you able to give your email so folks can follow up with you later if they want to see those signs?
The short answer is yes. To be able to
Okay.
send it right now, let me see if I can get my team to send me one. If not, then I will put my email in the chat right now, and I will forward it to it. You know what? Does everybody already have Gina's? Do we want to do that? Because Gina, you probably want that anyway, right?
Yeah, and I have, I think I have copies of your signs too, but I'll put
Yeah.
my,
Let's see if Jordan can get one sent to us real quick here.
and you don't have to have printers in your trucks, truly, especially if you've got the ability to utilize a fundraising arm in your organization, because I know government shelters are strapped for money, but there is a way to get, donated product. Those, but basically they're those yard signs with the two metal pokes in them. And if you have blank ones, you have blank ones. It's not cost prohibitive. They probably wouldn't use it on every single dog they picked up. It depends on the circumstances. Some agencies just printed out door hangers, and instead of putting lawn signs out. You don't use door hangers too, Ed, on the
Ours
doorknobs?
are actually pieces of paper, different color, because we try to take them down every couple months. We go in, we're in a different color, and they staple them to a telephone pole. So they're literally just a piece of paper with real big, I was found. Again, we'll see if the team can send me one, and we'll share it out. But something to get their attention. Again, half of it is simply staying in the neighborhood. People will say, "What are you doing here?" And you can say, "Yeah, I just found this dog." So I get it. I'm an officer myself. I don't go out in the field like I used to, but you're busy. If they're able to, or even the process is that, hey, you're going to do a figure eight on around the block 2 times before you leave the neighborhood with your lights flashing, you'd be amazed at how many people, oh man, I see the dog guy out there. And it may very well be their dog that's on your truck.
Right. There's another question about the rules with utility companies and stapling. The recommendation is absolutely to go back and remove your sign.
Yep, we do
period.
have those too, and our code doesn't enforce it. They're too busy to, but the agreement is as long as we go back and make an attempt to take them down as well, and that's why we rotate the colors.
I want to talk a little bit about the actual culture shift. You're talking about your officers spending time in the neighborhood. It's almost like community-oriented policing. And I know not all officers can spend time in their own beat and they're ping-ponging all over the community, but taking that extra 3 to 5 minutes to have conversations with the neighbors, with the area kids, you're developing a rapport so that the community sees us as the helpers and not the enemy, so that when we do need their help, either to find someone's home or an investigation, they're already in love with us because we have spent time getting to know them. Stopping in that little corner store once in a while for no good reason, but to introduce yourself. Once officers start doing that and they become perceived as heroes, that is how culture changes. You said something about citations with a perk. So in Sacramento, when I was at Front Street, an officer would give out a citation for no license, but also offer at the very same time, here's the card, you call, get a free spay and neuter. So, and it'll get you out of your ticket. The customer doesn't even need to know that that's just normal what we're doing, but it's almost like we're doing them a favor, if that makes any sense. Did I miss a question? You guys are typing too fast. Recommendation on chronic offender, dogs always running at large. We have no fence program in our community. We struggle with not impounding these dogs that are unaltered, unchipped, unvaccinated, and are chronic problems. If they come into the shelter, at least we can vax, alter, chip, and maybe the owner will keep the animal contained if they have to pay. Thoughts on that?
So my thought would be to figure out what is doable by your agency. Is a free spay neuter something that you can offer? Is a tether of some kind or a runner of some kind something that you can offer? And I know that tethers are controversial, but in a lot of situations, especially appropriate tethers, making sure they've got the right equipment is better than a dog running at large. So looking at kind of what you have within your arsenal, I guess, to throw out the situation, and then also looking at the owner's property and setup and kind of basically going through their habits and how the animal is getting loose, and really just doing some conversational education and coaching with the owner on what some small habit changes could be to help curb this issue.
And I think it's interesting that the first time Josh and I like talked in person, he was speaking at a NACA conference. I think it was NACA. I don't know. It was a conference a couple of years ago. And he was talking to one of my officers, and things are crazy in Dallas. There's a lot of animals. There was a study on loose animals, and they staffed us to secure loose animals. So Josh's like, I don't know who your boss is, but I want to talk to him. You shouldn't be trying to, catch animals. And I'm sitting in the back of the room just like, oh God, I got to talk to this guy before he starts tearing me apart more. But we were able to talk. And it's like, look, we're mandated. They've got it. There was actually a study of how many thousands of loose animals, but this is how we're trying to deal with that. And I think Josh likes me a little more now that he was able to explain that, okay, when somebody puts a barrier up, you just have to find a way. Do you go over the barrier, around the barrier, to the left, to the right? Sometimes you got to go under the barrier, and sometimes you got to just knock the barrier down. And every agency is different. We all answer to different people. But if at the end of the day, there's not a government out there right now that doesn't want to fix a root cause, and just catching the dog doesn't fix the root cause. Like Josh said, all of the extra things, why is it getting out? Okay, it needs to be fixed, and let's come up with a program that they can get free services. Let's get a thing. We don't want them in the criminal system forever. That begets more and more problems that just, barrel on down the line. So find a way to get over, above, around, or through that barrier.
Yeah, someone put, I think it was Chris Rochester, that he liked what Matt Pepper says. You have to ask the pet owner, do you love your animal? I mean, do you want to keep your animal, the one that keeps getting out repeatedly? And, 99% of the time, of course they do. So then, both of them concur, getting to the root of the problem. Sometimes the citation is the only thing you can do, but you shouldn't always start there, I don't think.
And actually, that brings up a good two questions that we have that were coming up in the chat. And one was for Ed and Josh, are the ACOs assigned to the same geographical area repeatedly, so they get to know the animals in that area? And then piggybacking off of that, there's, and kind of going about, does the owner guardian actually care? What about officers? And this is a great cultural question. This is from Deanne Schaefer. What about those officers that think everyone in their community with a dog is a low life? I'm assuming not Deanne's words, but words that she's actually heard before too. So do the officers get to go back to the same areas? And what about the officers that have a negative perception of the folks in their community?
Two things on that. Yes, we try to assign them to the same area. Sometimes scheduling, and especially with COVID operations and how we're split up, that can certainly change more. But we do. They get to know that area. But then we do try to rotate them every so many months for a new area, so that you're not blind. You could work somewhere for 10 years and have never worked go-to area. Then on the days that we're staffed more, you go back down to lower 9, you work well in that area. On the thing about the low life and that judgmental, you got much bigger problems than returning a dog to owner. That if that is the true thoughts, again, it's tough. I get it. We see all aspects of society in our industry. But if the go-to is that they don't deserve the pet, and this is probably for another talk at some point, but this industry has tried really hard with that model of let's take dogs from poor and bad areas and give them to wealthy and better areas. It doesn't work. It's completely racist. And it systematically doesn't get to the root cause of the issue. You're not going to get rid of people having pets. So how about you help them try to be the best pet owner that they can be? And that is a shift of the mind. And if at the end of the day, if you can't get yourself there, I appreciate you as an employee, but if you're going to work for me, you're still going to follow our policies and procedures.
100%. Did you have another one, Amber, or am I looking for another one? There was a little bit of chatter about ACOs microchipping in the field. I know that there are some agencies that are doing that, which is terrific, provided the organization is registering the chip on behalf of that pet owner. And in some states, it's prohibited by the veterinary boards. So it all depends what the law allows for. Are you guys doing that, Josh or Ed, chipping in the field?
We will send a veterinarian out, but in the state of North Carolina, microchipping is considered a permanent alteration, and so has to be done by a licensed veterinarian.
And we are about to be. There's total legitimate as far as one person trying to do it, trusting the owner to secure the animal. We have a couple of operations teams that operate throughout Dallas, so we're starting with that so that there's multiple people, and that's also going to be a way of us to hopefully start lessening the number of citations. Again, if at the end of the day you want the person in compliance, try to find a way to help them get into compliance. The ticket's just the easy way, but again, that may not be giving you a long-term footing. So we just got a grant for it, and we are working on getting that in the ground, microchipping in the field. That was one of the hurdles, that at least now we know the dog for sure. And if they don't do the other compliance things, if we get the dog again, you can say, we impounded this dog in March of this year, put a microchip in it for you. You still didn't get it fixed and get your rabies shots current. It does equal a citation now. It's one way for us to hopefully write less citations, but still try to get compliance.
There was some conversation about public recognition, and even if people say they don't want the recognition, they do. Thank you, Gina, for sharing your story involving your local fire department, your local police officers. They need, especially the police, could sure use some positive social media. So if there's an opportunity to tell a story, to brag about an RTO, and it's also good for your teams. It incentivizes without, it's a subliminal incentivization. People need to feel good about something. And I can't think of anything better than an RTO, in my opinion, to kind of boost morale.
Yeah, and if Ed or Josh, you had any other suggestions about getting the local partners, especially police, involved. Serena Warren asks, she says, I find police are often involved with stray calls, and they've been trying to build the culture, but the police are actually so busy handling non-animal calls. Any ideas on how we can help our police take this more seriously? And I would imagine the same would be true for firemen, right, who are responding to other emergencies too.
But there are a lot of fire stations that are now equipped with microchip scanners, and North Carolina.
What Paula did in El Paso was amazing with fire stations. Again, your area. Josh can probably speak to PD even more than I can. Dallas they're busy. The police are under fire for not getting to all kinds of police calls. Every one of my officers has a scanner. Every when we do dead animal remains collection, they all have scanners. It's our identification through our big shelter system. So scanning is just a part of life for us, and we'll get anybody a scanner who needs it. But I think if your police department can handle it, that would be terrific. But I do think you need to be cognizant that there's not many police departments that aren't as busy as animal control is these days.
And maybe depending upon your organization, maybe it's the corner barbershop that gets a scanner, or the corner grocery store. It depends on the demographics of your area, but think outside of the proverbial box. Maybe it's the little community center where the kids go play basketball that has an extra scanner. We don't have to just, and I wouldn't try to burden the police with that role, because they are too busy in most places.
Yeah, so we're super fortunate in Charlotte in some ways, and absolutely horribly unfortunate in others. We're part of police. So we have multiple police stations all across the county. All of our police stations have a scanner in them. All of our fire stations have a scanner in them. We definitely have embraced what Gina's talking about with certain specific kind of community hotspots. We have found local bars, some of the outdoor bars that have, especially during COVID, like a walk-up window where they can get cocktails, and you just see people tend to kind of mill in those areas. We have found that having some scanners available to them is ideal. As far as police responding to calls, it's the nature of the beast in a lot of ways, because if you don't have animal control available and there is a patrol officer, likely the call is going to get kicked over to them. If you can develop a strong working relationship with especially your community coordinator group within the police department, like Gina said, this is a a community policing approach in a lot of ways. So a lot of police departments are shifting to that, and they have specific officers that are designated as community coordinators whose primary roles are to enhance and develop those relationships. And so if you can start with them, if you are able to make sure that they have scanners, and then B, are able to kind of work with them and make sure they have strong points of contact within your organization, so that they have names that they can call rather than just calling a general code over the radio or a general phone number. Putting faces with names helps a lot, especially with police, because they are very relationship oriented. And then anytime that you have your folks who are kind of in charge within your organization can make some inroads with the leadership of police, that's always beneficial. Like I said, we're super fortunate in that respect in Charlotte, because I am considered command staff within the police department. So I kind of get to put some of those mandates out there and say no if this then that. But most communities, if you can just get a really solid partner within police who can say, no, we're not just dumping this, we're going to make sure that whenever possible, we're handling it.
There was a question, thank you, Josh, about where do y'all get your scanners? And now, granted, I work for Michelson Found Animals, and if anybody tells my boss, I'm probably going to lose my job. But I think the best scanner on the market is the Home Again scanner, but it's probably the most expensive too, but it lasts forever. There's a myriad of scanners out there. You get what you pay for. So if you find one for $29.99, don't expect it to last very long. But do your homework. They're not very priced very differently, but they're definitely, totally worth the investment. And there's a really good fundraising mechanism, right? You put a GoFundMe on your Facebook page and say, we want to put scanners all over, your community. People will pay for that. Yeah. People want to help. Americans love their dogs. Let's let them help us. But something about that I popped into my head when I was looking at your incentive board, Josh, as far as the stats. Does everybody in your organization know what your current RTO rate have you set any goals for everyone in your organization to say, this year we're going to do, I don't know, whether it's 5% more or 200 more animals, but everybody needs to be able to speak RTO. And I know that might sound silly, but if you're going to change a culture and create a movement where this is a priority, everyone, including the volunteers, need to know where you stand. What are you doing? What do you hope to be doing? And why is it important? Ed talked about the why being, saves money, better for the animal, better for the owners, blah, 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 reduces length of stay, reduces work. But if you don't have those conversations with your teams, we can't hope that they'll begin to understand and want to shift toward a culture where RTO is a number one priority, a first outcome over anything else.
Yeah, so we've actually built it into our strategic plan so that it is part of what all of our staff and all of our volunteers see. Our strategic plan looks very similar to our org chart from a visual / graphical perspective. And with our field operations and customer service staff, RTO is an item within that strategic plan, and that it also translates over into our bi-monthly volunteer presentations. So everybody in our organization should know what our RTO rate and what the goal is. Whether they do know or not depends on how many times they get quizzed walking down the hallway.
Yeah. Well, what you focus on, what you measure gets done. Sorry, Ed, go ahead.
No, it's all right. No, and it is for ours. It is a goal. Again, going back to when I had met Josh and I was telling him all this stuff. Yeah, they're actually supposed to impound so many dogs a day. They're, all this and that, but we started running with the return to owner. And then we're real big on our performance evaluations for our staff and their goals. Return to owner is one. COVID has thrown everything off because we did a ton of proactive calls. Again, it just got to root issues way better. Why make the resident call something in when you drive by and see it stop? But we're only doing emergency proactive calls. So this is crazy to say in Dallas, we're not stopping for every loose dog. Gina's dog sitting on our porch again. We know it's Gina's dog. There's a whole ripple effect once we have that face-to-face touch, and then she's got to, do whatever to get the animal in compliance and stuff. So we're not doing those. But for the department, last year we had a 35% goal for return to own rate. and we hit that. We're down to 30 this year, but again, there's most of the animals coming in the shelter have to come in, and many of those are, there's not an option to be returned to owner is the reason that they're coming in. But it's important that they see that and at least know whether it's departmental or individual goals as well. I think it was 1 or 2 RTOs in field was the expectations per officer we had when we were running, you know, at full tilt.
One of the things that I tried to pitch in my teachings across the country was to get an agency to develop an RTO pin, because officers like those things on their uniforms. And I think Greenville did it. So once a year, they will look at the return in field numbers, and an officer is awarded with a pin of recognition, which police departments used to do for like the number of stolen cars recovered. Same premise. And the officers really like those things, and they're not cost prohibitive. Amber, did I miss any questions? I know there was some chatter about cats. There's a cat rescue organization in Northern California called Field Haven, and they have been shipping cats all over Northern California. And the RTO rate for cats in that neck of the woods is exponentially higher than other organizations. I think the only solution for cats is a microchip, since a lot of people won't collar them. Josh, and you guys are chipping all the cats you can get your chips into, right?
Yeah, the numbers are just significantly lower on cat return to owner. As more microchips get in the animals, it starts to go up. But it's night and day different. A couple hundred compared to, shoot, what did I have? It was 200 compared to 10,800 or so as far as dogs versus cats. So just kind of the nature of the thing.
But it's also how are people calculating the cats? So you'd want to peel off the ferals, all the underage cats, right? And so when you look at it that way, your total, like normal house cat pet type animal is a lot lower. And so when you do the math, it's really a higher RTO rate. I would wager it's more 9 to 10% versus 1 to 2%.
Yeah. And I think you might have had talks with Jordan, and I think even on RTO, I think it's of all animals. We just didn't want to change our metric once we started reporting out on it. So there's some animals that they don't have a chance of going home. They don't. The owner died. That's why you have the animal. So my understanding is that we kind of wish what was called return to owner rate was calculated a little bit different. I think it should be of the animals that have a chance to go home. But like everything in this industry, everybody started trying to record stuff and nobody has it totally uniformed. So that's of all of our animals.
Yeah. Chris made a point. Do we calculate cats being returned to colonies as part of the return to home? Up until now, we haven't, but we're having some conversations with organizations like Christie Metropole in Southern Cal. Cats that are successfully returned to their colonies should perhaps be counted as a successful return to home. So stay tuned for more chatter on that topic for sure. Brietta Adams says, we've made a considerable dent in cat return to owner by microchipping every animal that's adopted from us. Yay, 100%. I just convinced our local shelter where I live in Idaho to do that. They never thought about chipping cats because they're only adopted to indoor homes, as we chuckle about that comment.
Mm-hmm. And they all stay inside, don't they?
That's right. They never get out. Okay, a similar question just popped up about colony cats or street cats, if you will. What else can we add about shifting culture?
It
doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it's something that my team happens to love technology. And so when you can find cool people, and if you knew that team, especially that used to be at Front Street, they did a lot of cool stuff with technology. So our team is really embraced on the text for lost animal. And it just walks people through the process of what to do. Because if you're in that mindset that everybody who watches your Facebook page or your Twitter page, they already know their dog got out. They're at the show. They probably already have a microchip and everything. You probably RTO'd it in field anyway. But if not, they're already at your shelter waiting for the animal. We like to think, because the world we live in is so wild to us and big, that, oh, this was the cutest post ever. Mm-hmm. There's 1.3 million people in the city of Dallas alone. So, all right, your Facebook post just got 10,000 interactions. You barely scratched the surface on how many people actually saw that stuff. So, but text messaging, everybody uses. So those are the type of things that are kind of, to me, next level, trying to get into different avenues than what we have done. But that was actually pretty easy as to set up. That will walk people through. Hey, it's day whatever. Have you done this looking for your pet? And have you checked the Dallas Animal Services website? And it's pretty cool.
There was a statement in the chat about microchipping even the community cats, but they don't register them, but they monitor their way through there. And I don't think there's an issue with not registering the chip on community cats, because it's easy enough to go back to your organization. But one thing that we have found, we did a study that shelters that register the chip at time of implant have an exponentially higher return to owner rate than shelters that don't. And I was really surprised at how many agencies will chip, or even veterinarians, they'll chip, and then the reliance to register is on the owner. We're the experts, we're the ones that should be doing that and explaining, how to update to the person who has the pet.
And Gina, Ed, and Josh, I just wanted to let you know there's about a 5-minute warning. We may have a little bit of housekeeping stuff to go over at the end. So if anyone has a question for Josh, Gina, or Ed, please definitely let us know in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you in the next few minutes.
Someone posted about having a lost pet page separate from their main Facebook page.
Mhm.
If you can manage it, it's a great resource. If you can't manage it, then don't do it. Dallas doesn't. You don't have one, Ed, right? It's
ours
too
is
overwhelming.
No, ours are the stray animals and then the adoptable animals, but you can adopt also from animals off stray hold. But yeah, most software systems will do it if you're able to put in the work. Of the 4 or 5 main software, you can separate, these are the adoptable animals and these are the stray animals. And yeah, ours are separated like that. You can search for stray animals or adoptable animals. And we use Chameleon, and it's no extra work once you get it set up. It's not extra work other than changing it in the system.
On your website, but not on Facebook.
I'm pretty sure on our Facebook it is too, but I could
really? Okay. I have to go look at that. Josh, are you doing anything like that?
We have a Lost Pets Charlotte Facebook page, and it's managed by, I think we've got a couple folks on staff that are admins on the page, but there's also a pretty large volunteer base that serve as admins on the page. And it's got very clear rules about what is and isn't appropriate, and what can and can't happen on the page. And the admins on that page are quick to enforce those rules.
Yeah, something that we've been trying to push also is developing relationships with those private community members that run those myriad of Facebook pages out there for lost and found. Some cities have a dozen or more. So reaching out and developing a partnership with them is one of the smartest things you can do.
Yeah, it's almost, it's such a redundancy that when there is a million different groups, people don't know. They know their friend said, oh, if I look at Lost and Found Pets of Dallas, just as a total example, but there's 15 other groups and somebody posted it on that. So that's when it's better to work with them. And if you can get it where, hey, you pull your information, or we'll send you a list every day, twice a day or whatever, they'll actually like that engagement to get it more direct from the shelter. But it's totally worth it, because someone could be staring at this one page every single day and not even realizing that it's posted on three other pages.
Right.
Nextdoor has been huge too. We only target when there's real specific things. Nextdoor is interesting because it can get to that geographical area. And as governments, you have certain accesses to Nextdoor that other businesses don't have access to. So we have been playing around in that arena and having some pretty good success.
Yeah, you have some really great data that you've kept track of, and on the use of Nextdoor. I'm a huge Nextdoor advocate. Especially government shelters, it's far easier to get an account than it is for a private agency. Super, super helpful, and with a lot of unintended positive side effects. Okay, how are we doing for time, Amber?
We've got about 3 minutes left. So I think one question that came in that you might be able to answer quickly while we're talking about social media is, are you able, does anyone know, to do blasts on Nextdoor to push that information out?
Depending on the kind of account you have.
Yeah.
So like we as a government agency can, if you were just a private nonprofit or something like that, it would be extremely difficult to get an account that could do a blast.
Yeah, you can get a business account, but it's cost prohibitive, period. That's how they make money. They monetize it that way.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then another question, if you want to answer quickly, is do you require spay neuter before redemption? Because they found that many of their strays are not spayed and neutered when they're coming in. This might be a larger question when we talk about policies and legislation, but Ed and Josh, if you just wanted to say quickly, do you require that?
Yes, but you need to be careful with it. Luckily, we have the resources. You come to claim your animal, sign the paper, he's getting fixed the next morning and leaving. When I was in Cleveland, we didn't have that capability. So it's one thing to say mandatory spay neuter. If you can't get it done, you're actually adding to a ton of unnecessary death. So you've got to play within your system. And again, why we can do it in the field is because those are fix-it tickets and there are resources to get them done. So that's why, yeah, we can take your dog straight to you. He's not fixed. You're going to get these citations that have these fix-it tickets. The citation disappears within 3 weeks as long as you get it done, and we'll then help you get it done for free. And if you don't, then now there is the criminal process, which again, we really try to explain. We don't want you to have this. This will be totally thrown away, but you got to make this appointment and keep that appointment so we can let the courts know that it got done. But your veterinary capability is a big deal. Be careful when you make those laws. They sound really good, but you can really have a big backlog by doing that.
Yeah, we don't mandate spay neuter in order to reclaim, but we do offer to waive fees if they sterilize prior to reclaim. We do, however, mandate microchip, and we actually have it set up in our legal system so that anything that touches the animal shelter is required by law to be microchipped. So nothing can leave our premises without a microchip in it.
And as far as incentives, we actually wrote in our ordinances in 2018 as an incentive for people to get there quickly. We waive all of the fees if you claim your animal on the first full day it's there. So if it comes in at noon on Tuesday, that's not a full day. You got till the end of the day Wednesday. And we try to yell that from the mountaintops. Don't wait around, here, let's get this in the fees, because we're like, oh, I don't got the money to come. No, the fees are waived if you come within the first full day.
I wish we could come up with a way to reward pet owners that do all of the things, right? They're vaccinated, they're chipped, they're licensed, they're all of the things they're supposed to do. And if they come in and get their dog on the first day, we actually give them $50. We just saved us a fortune. I'm going to figure it out, Ed. Stay tuned.
Well, I think that's an awesome note to end on, don't you? Stay tuned for Gina's master plan. I mean, you've done so many wonderful things. I can't imagine that we can't continue to do more. So that concludes our Huddle presentation. Huge thanks to Gina, Ed, and Josh for sharing part of their day with us, and for all of you for joining us too. Our next Huddle is scheduled this Thursday, February 4th from 1 to 1:50 Pacific time. And this one's going to be focused on websites and marketing. And remember, if you aren't able to join this live, please register and you can always view the recording. And we encourage you to ask and answer questions and share your ideas in Maddie's Pet Forum. This is a challenge, but part of the challenge is challenging all of you to join together to return more pets home. This is a great place to see flyers and posters, door hangers, talk about fundraising for scanners, talk about return to home for cats and all those redemption fees, all those great subjects that came up in more detail. So that is maddiespetforum.org, and it's the No Place Like Home Challenge group. So I look forward to seeing everyone in future huddles. Thank you again for joining us today, for all you do for the animals. And please, everyone, stay safe so we can see you again soon. Take good care.